give a fuck.
Are you sure?
I just don't give a fuck.
Presenting The Art of Not Giving a Fuck with Garrett John.
Hey everybody, and welcome to tonight's episode of the Art of Not Giving a Fuck Victim to Adventure podcast. We've got a very special guest, a long time in the making, I'd say at least 6 years, since kind of back to the origins of Command Z. And that guest is none other than Mark Joyner, founder of Simpleology, and known to many as the father of many aspects of online marketing. And we'll get into some of the details of that as we go. But thanks for joining me, Mark. It's great to catch up with you and have you on the show finally. And there's lots of things I wanted to get into tonight, but there's one inspiring story that I only saw as part of one of your Simpleology courses. I'm not even sure I remember exactly which one. There's a couple neat ones I'd like to touch on, but this was about a story about you being on the couch, overweight and kind of buried under life at a specific circumstance. Am I getting that correct?
I've been at that point a couple times.
Right.
You know, I would like to say that I won't be there again. You know, I think I probably have more of an understanding of what it takes to stay out of that at this point in my life than I did, obviously, at those points. But yeah, sure, I'm not ashamed to say that, you know, and I think there are a lot of people who want to create sort of a fantasy image of themselves. And I get it. I understand that there are certainly, you know, persuasive and social consequences to being an open book about your life. But I don't find that an altogether healthy notion
Right.
for the world. You know, I think we all kind of need to be a little more forgiving of each other. It'll help us get through these types of problems a lot more efficiently. But I've been there.
Well, the reason I bring it up, and I wanted to explore some of the feelings or some of the thoughts that go on in a space of being overwhelmed like that. I've been there too in my life many times. And in some ways there's plateaus and pit stops of inertia, and I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with it. But to bring it up, because I know there's guys listening who feel completely overwhelmed by the circumstances of their life and don't even know how or where to get a foothold to start clawing their way up out of that. So what I aim to do is with each, every sentence that we say here is to offer some sort of inspiration or a rope or a blueprint or an escape plan or just even a few words that'll dig deep and allow a person to start to claw their way out of that.
Well, what I would say is, there is a cyclical nature to life. I believe there is a cyclical nature probably to existence itself, to the deep construct of the universe itself. You know, the yin and the yang is, one of the oldest and perhaps, truest ways of describing that whole thing. However, with that said, I do think that we can attenuate the lows a bit with knowledge. Some of these lows, some of the struggles are unnecessary when you acquire the right knowledge. And this is the thing. I think when people experience despair, a lot of that despair comes from a lack of options. And the lack of options comes from a lack of understanding. And it's interesting you bring up overwhelm. It's kind of the principal problem that we solve in Simpleology. Procrastination and overwhelm are the two things that I foresaw becoming a bigger problem for people, I guess over 10 years ago now when we first started this particular company. What it comes down to is this thing that we've described as the complexity gap. And it's based on this notion, the amount of information being entered into the knowledge stream is not only increasing every day, but the rate at which it is increasing is increasing.
Yeah.
So the rate is increasing. And when people get their heads around that, this is a huge concept. I remember Eric Schmidt around 2010 was saying that it's, exabytes, a few exabytes of data being entered into the stream on a daily basis. But every year that, that daily number is increasing, right? So, we are really facing an exponential problem here. Everything is increasing exponentially, positively and negatively, right? And this makes the problem more dire. Now, where the gap comes in is this: while you have this exponential curve that we're experiencing in terms of data, which is, I think, a relatively good representation of the volume of overwhelm as well.
Right. Yeah.
While that's
of course.
an exponential curve, the processing capacity of the human brain is a linear constant. Now, yes, there are ways we can augment that and improve it, and maybe we're going to make some huge strides there, and I assume that we will. However, it seems for the moment that the rate of data increase is much, much faster than the rate of improvement of processing capacity. Now, this is getting a little bit technical, and I want folks to understand that I'm saying all this because this is my way of throwing you a lifeline. The lifeline comes in the form of understanding, right? You need to get the understanding first. First, in this moment, though, you've got to accept me at face value when I say that the lifeline exists. But let's understand the problem. 7 bits of data plus or minus 2. This is the famous paper that came out of, I think, Princeton by a gentleman named Miller in the 1970s. He observed that, the number 7, the magic number 7 plus or minus 2 is the name of the paper, is a representation of how much information we can process in working memory in the brain. I point to the brain. I don't believe that the brain explains all conscious phenomena completely, but that's our metaphor. So, and the amount of data coming in is increasing exponentially. That is the gap, and the gap is widening. If it's here, it's going like this. So we have to have a way of managing that, right? So the first thing that we have to understand is that the attempts to handle that through just getting faster and learning more and multitasking and all of that breaks you, right? So far as we know, up to this point of human evolution, it is not a tenable proposition because what that leads to is shutdown. And a really wonderful metaphor for that is that it's like having multiple windows open on your computer. The more windows you open, the more and more sluggish the computer becomes. And that's exactly what happens to the human brain when you have too many things on your mind, when you are overwhelmed, right? The computer starts to get sluggish, it starts to act wonky, and then it crashes. You, my friends, crash when overwhelm hits you, right? That's the feeling. And I know when I explain that metaphor to people, they're like, wow, damn, that's right. That's how I feel when overwhelm hits. I crash, I get on the couch because there's nothing else for me to do, right? So what you gotta do, and this is what Simpleology does for people, the basic foundational function of the software without getting into the more sophisticated stuff later on, is it teaches you how to close those windows and how to function within the conscious processing capacity of the human brain in a way that allows you to achieve equilibrium and to sort of optimize the performance of your computer. So that is what we do in white belt in Simpleology. It goes all the way up to black belt, and there's a lot of other really cool stuff too. But that's because I think that problem is getting worse and worse, and it's going to affect people more and more and more. But simultaneously, they still have to function within this increasingly complex world. That's the problem that we're solving, because it's a problem that's not really solved for most people outside of what we're doing. So there you go. There's my long answer, and it's a bit of a nerdy technical lifeline to throw at people, but I think it's the right one to throw at people because it's the one that certainly works for me and for the people that use it.
Yeah, well, and that it does translate over to a lot of the work some of these guys have tried, or what they've seen on our, the exercises coming out from us, is that it's getting you to stop creating, for example, doing extra work to just maintain your position in your body. You know what I mean? Chronic tensions throughout, around all the joints and in all different ways, from learning how to hold the body and from being in couch pose, for years at a time, what that does to the body and the tensions that build up. And then from there also that a matter of focus. What I find, I like to call myself a garbage man in working with clients, meaning I'm not even going to add anything or even tell you about the cool stuff adventures that I've discovered you can go on in consciousness and outside, until a person removes the focus off of all these problems and dramas and bullshit in their life, and most of politics and most of whatever other issues the TV's telling you should take a side on. Scrap all of that and start fresh. And if you have to answer a question, answer it by being present and deciding what you think at the time, rather than carrying a giant backpack full of templated answers to life. And a lot of the Simpleology early courses touched on that in very many different ways, and dovetail nicely with that, with the bodywork side of things. The mental side gets covered in there in an exceptional way, I feel like. Yeah.
Well, thank you. I think that what you're doing on the body side is extremely important, because you're right. We are finding now that there are these psychosomatic connections. That tension in the mind manifests as tension in the body. And when you compound that with just the absolute barrage of biomechanical assaults that we're throwing on the body these days with sitting, I am standing right now. I sit almost never anymore. I just don't like to sit. I don't like to put myself in biomechanically compromised positions, because there are all of these compensations that have to occur from all of these, imbalances that these things create, and that goes the other way as well, right? It manifests in mental tension too. Mm-hmm. And I really love that you're bringing up politics, for example. I used to be in the military intelligence community, and I understand how a lot of that works. And I mean, one way to control a populace is to give them an unsolvable problem, right? It is not possible to know everything in politics right now. I mean, this goes back to the Platonic Republic notion. The notion of the Platonic Republic, I thought, was just so far ahead of its time. The average guy, even back then, didn't have the time to be able to master politics to the extent that is required to make intelligent decisions about politics, right? So the idea, well, this was what the Republic was all about. And, we are supposed to be a republic in the United States, but the average guy doesn't really understand these dynamics at all. We don't teach it to people. We tell people it's about democracy. Well, no, democracy is bullshit. Okay, democracy is mob rule. Yeah. And when people talk about democracy, it demonstrates an absolute misunderstanding of these phenomena. I mean, the basic structural foundation of the United States is not about democracy, right? Yeah. But the point here is that Plato said that we were supposed to have a sequestered political class that was trained on a moral level to have the best interests of society in mind, mm-hmm. right? But what we have now is a deeply corrupted version of that. We elect representatives, but because those representatives are corruptible, because they are not a sequestered class mm-hmm. who is protected from the influences of the financial world, of the business world, of whatever special, unique interests, it's broken, mm-hmm. and it's going to be broken. It's not going to work anyway. I think that the whole notion of politics as we practice them now is probably going to be obsolete right around 2030 or beyond anyway. We can talk about that. But people get wrapped up in this. They're wrapped up in an unsolvable problem. They didn't have the ability to understand it, have an educated opinion, 2,000 years ago. They especially don't have it today. They don't have it in spades today.
Yeah.
And then compound on that the fact that there is a very active misinformation effort. Now, a lot of people, when they hear that, they go, "Oh, it's just some crazy conspiracy theory, what do you mean they're trying to deceive us?" No, it's not a crazy conspiracy theory at all. It's what government has been engaged in, probably since the beginning of government.
Right.
And I think to think otherwise is a very naive sort of notion. But yeah, it makes people sick, physically sick.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's a book by Fredy Perlman I read back in my more anarchist kind of political days, and it's called the Against History Against Leviathan. It's like a long a prose poem in a way, but he talks about even in the Sumerian culture that they divide that in order to control or even come up with the concept of control, there had to be something with which to focus that control on, and in that case it was water systems. And that when people did things that the others that somehow seized that control disliked, they would be put in charge of having to build the water systems for the society. And then the people who took charge of those water systems or declared that they were the owners of it then would say, "Hey, we're the owners of it." Well, that's a disinformation campaign at its roots, because no one owns the water system. Still no one owns the rivers. They think they do, but no one still does. It's a trick. It's a mental trick. I mean, just like borders and nation states, and it starts to reify if you get generations of people believing it and acting as if it is the truth, and so you get fences and walls and borders. But we know those come down, like in Berlin, and these structures change rapidly. And like, say, some places in Africa, for example, you can check on a day-to-day basis the names changing in certain areas. And political boundaries being redefined. So I'd say the notion of society at its roots is involved in that misinformation campaign from the get-go about the way control and power works.
Absolutely. Well, it's interesting. I have not heard of that poem, but are you familiar with the concept of the Hobbesian Leviathan?
I think that's where he took the term Leviathan from. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, and that's actually a very interesting thing, right? It was noticing this inherent corruptibility of rule, and it was to create this beast that could never be slayed, and the beast was the most humane way to govern, right? And the beast is an abstract construct that's not run ever by any one group of people, because the beast itself is this untenable, untamable thing. Now, whether or not that's how things are actually run or not is a debatable thing. And again, this is an unknowable. We can't know it. Are there people at the center of that who actually run things? I think you could make a very, very good evidence-based argument for that particular notion. But it's fascinating. Now, what I would think we should segue into, which I think is really interesting here, is that I think all of this is going to go away, and none of this matters anymore because of a couple interesting developments that tie very closely into what we opened the conversation with.
Yeah, let's hear it. I'm all ears, man.
Well, okay, so these exponential trends, if you're following, the work of guys like Kurzweil and the singularity movement and all of that, people don't understand that, Kurzweil Kurzweil didn't invent the singularity. There was another guy who coined the term. His name escapes me in the moment, but he was a science fiction author who entered that notion into the common discourse. But this idea that the processing power of artificial intelligence is going to surpass human intelligence by around 2025-ish, right? Now, is that true? I mean, we can debate about this. They're measuring that in raw floating point operations. I think that there's a heck of a lot more going on in the brain than the analytical stuff that most neuroscientists are focused on. I believe that mind extends beyond the brain. I believe there's a tremendous amount of evidence to support that. However, I think that the point is one that's well made. what happens when machines become so intelligent that they are no longer predictable and controllable, and what happens when those trends extend out to pretty much every industry in the world. Now, the singularity theorist guys are all focused on the positive impacts of these things, and I think it's great to focus on that. However, I think we'd be very misguided to ignore the potential negative impacts of these things. And I think that the point that I'd like to draw people to is the impact on one particular industry. And let's just say this, let's just simplify it and dumb it down. If everything is getting smaller, cheaper, more available, right? And more powerful, what happens when those four things happen to weapons technology? How many iterative clock cycles do we need to go through before everyone has a 3D printable WMD? Now, well, we laugh at that notion now. It sounds so science fiction, but it's not so science fiction after all. We're actually super duper close to that. In our lifetimes, we're going to see this if we're lucky, right? What's going to happen to government when the mechanisms of control are no longer monopolized? And we're starting to see that right now in this political campaign in 2016. So what is the date today? So we can give people historical context, because in 2 years, this conversation might seem strange, but what's happened? So it's April 7th, 2016 on my side. I'm over the date line. I think it's April 6th for you, right?
Yep.
So right now we're going through this very interesting political campaign, and we're seeing a very interesting backlash against the mechanisms of control in government, against the mechanisms of control in media, right? That is just the harbinger, man. It's the canary in the coal mine. It is going to get a lot weirder. It's going to get a lot more chaotic. And I think, people scoff at this, everything's going to be fine. Well, okay, go ahead and keep thinking that. I'm going to tell you, every year it's going to get weirder, right? I think that the highest levels of government are probably very acutely aware of this phenomenon. And I hypothesize, I'm guessing, that their answer to this is to create more mechanisms of control, to put us all on lockdown, that's the only way we will be able to keep society intact once this gets weirder and weirder. I don't think it's going to work, because I think that the tech genie is out of the bottle already, and I don't think total lockdown, even if you put everyone on total lockdown inside their own little cubicle in life, it's not going to work. Why? Because the mechanisms require human maintenance, and the humans maintaining those things are going to inevitably have a conscience. We're starting to see that. The Panama Papers leak just happened a couple days ago. To put this in historical context for people, have you heard about that one?
No,
Panama
I have
Papers?
not. No.
Oh, brother, this is a huge thing. This is bigger potentially than anything WikiLeaks came out with. So I'm going to try to summarize this as briefly as I can. There was a bank that revealed the names of a bunch of people that had hidden offshore accounts. And many of them are heads of state and heads of business. And it's this huge, potentially majorly disruptive thing. Well, humans are speaking their conscience now. The people who were the guardians of these control mechanisms are speaking out. So lockdown ain't going to work, man. And so I think I know the only thing that's going to work at this point. I think I have the answer, but I'm not going to say that yet. Let's carry on the conversation and see where this goes before I say what my hypothesis is. I imagine you and I are probably pretty close on this topic, but let's open it up.
Well, yeah, it brings up a lot of questions, and my navigation through information in those systems is that I see what's banging around or what's, banging down my door, but I do not seek out the mainstream news at all anymore. I mean, on a zero level, except for if I see it trending across Facebook and those sources. So I'll get a feeling sense of what's going on, but I do tune out to a lot of it. But on the level that you're talking about, it does make sense, and it's something that I've thought about for years. There was a big article it was the guy who was in Wired, and he was the head of, or the chief technology officer of Sun Microsystems. What was his name? And I forget. And he was interviewed about, and he was sharing his views that he shared views with Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber, about technological development, and that it would eventually, of course, in Kaczynski's essay, it was that humans would end up just polishing each other's shoes and driving each other around in taxis. Well, the AI kind of operated in that they would be relatively just more hypnotized than they already are, and everyone would just be involved in some service business or another, servicing each other. And in some ways, you have that. I mean, I see that now, but it's on the back of stealing resources from other places in order to keep, fueling that situation. Now those people have the internet to see, like, oh, I'm not going to sit here and work in this stupid mine so some asshole can, have an extra toy or something, like, I think that that equalization of the information on the singularity level is happening. Where it concerns me or the people that I work with is on an individual level. How does that affect the brain of the singular, and the unit of change, I think, is the individual. At least the unit I can interact with, and that is how information passes from person to person, after all. So on the individual level, I think people are becoming aware that there's so much potential just in their own hands, in their own life. So you could start fermenting some foods. You could start creating, health around you and within your environment very rapidly. There's simple little things you can do with the use of the acceleration of information. But I don't necessarily see people doing that, and I don't know if the lockdown is going to be physical so much as it is mental. And what I see so far is in Switzerland, for example, you have a high suicide rate, and yet everything appears to be so idyllic and okay, and people are killing themselves because they don't know what to complain about. There's some strange ennui, postmodern illness of the mind on some level. We're actually thinking of reaching out to some select Silicon Valley programmers with an elite form of training of the mind that I think could help them become influencers instead of being hypnotized slaves on a giant circuit board, riding around in little buses. So it does dovetail back into that. What is the individual to do? But I see guys like you out there, you've been on a mission to expand your mind and help bring that to everyone through Simpleology, through your expanding reach, constantly. So maybe it'll be that. What was it David Bowie suggested in the 70s or 60s or 70s that he's like, come on, we need a quick fascist uprising here in order for all the smart people and geniuses and leftoids to wake up and start taking some adventurous action. I'm not saying I agree with that, but I'm saying perhaps in conjunction with the negative aspects, you'll see people grinding into some sort of awareness of what their potential is, and in a way being forced into action, or at least forced to declare if they're going to take some action or not.
Right. Yeah, well, I think that's going to happen. I mean, some people theorize that, there is we're under technocratic oppression now, right? One of the interesting narratives, of course, is that, the NWO narrative is based loosely around, the ideas of guys like H.G. Wells and whatnot, and that they were ushering us toward a technocratic utopia where a better managed society would eventually be evolved to, and that this justifies a lot of the ills that are overlords, whoever they are,
Sure.
are perpetrating on people. But I think, of course, that's not going to work if that is indeed happening. And I would imagine to some extent that's got to be happening, right? Who knows whether or not that's the real dominant narrative or not. But yeah, well, what you just talked about, I think, is exactly right. There could be an uprising as well, right? The technocratic uprising would be one more of conscience. If they believe that if there is technocratic oppression occurring right now, well, they're going to try to counteract that. And because all of this is it managed through information systems, the people who understand information systems and can hack them and organize them are the ones who are going to be the major players. So, I think at the end of the day, though, so what happens? Let's say there's an uprising and there's more chaos that creates more strife for the average guy, right? What happens then? What happens then? And we're dancing around the thing that I think we need to get to. But
yeah, well, I mean, well, I keep thinking of the victim to adventurer model, and in my experience or from my point of perspective, that sets you free, so that no matter how much trauma or turmoil appears to be going on, that you can maintain some level of stillness and even, I posit, some level of enjoyment of it, regardless.
Well, okay, and you nailed it as far as I'm concerned, right? And to me, the answer is summed up in 2 words: mental health,
Right?
which really summed up under 1 word: health.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have mental health without physical health, as far as
Yeah.
I'm concerned. And I think unfortunately, culture today excuses a lot of behavior that leads towards being very physically unhealthy, which clearly is going to have effects on the mind. I mean, to me, it's just pathological, a lot of the things going on. I'll give you a funny example. I posted on Facebook, I said, I saw a morbidly obese man today licking an ice cream cone, and I came this close to slapping it out of his hand. And my intention was not like to shame this guy, oh, stupid fatty McFatstein, I'm gonna slap your ice cream away and show you how to be a man. No, the idea was like, you're a brother, a human brother who's harming himself. Like, please stop that, man.
Yeah.
Nobody's helped you with this to this point in your life. Like, come on, we can't do this to each other. We can't function as a society allowing this to happen, because it requires all of us to be just absolutely negligent in our jobs as humans to allow that to continue.
Yeah.
And the backlash that I got from people for that comment was just, oh, I thought you were a good guy. I thought you were one of the good guys. And shame on you, Mark Joyner, for saying such things. And I was like, you guys are making a lot of assumptions about what my intentions were with this comment, and no matter what I tried to say, they'd be like, yeah, try to explain it away. You're just a bigot. You're a bigot. No, man, I know a lot of morbidly obese people in my life that I love very dearly, that I do my level best to help. Certainly not what it's about, but I'm trying to illustrate the depth of the pathology. You're saying control mechanisms may not be just physical. They are also mental, obviously. And that is one of the forms these control mechanisms take. They are little social memes where I can't remember who first came up with this notion, but it's that I think originally it was from the wonderful film My Dinner with Andre, where Andre was saying, Wally, we live in a prison, and the prison guards, well, they're ourselves. We've built our own prison, and he that comment came out. He was relaying actually some insight that was given to him at Findhorn, right? Or I think is maybe how it's pronounced. Is it Findhorn?
I think it's Findhorn. I don't know. The Scottish community. Yeah.
I would love to visit that place. I mean, they seem like they got a little more mental health going on there than the rest of the planet.
Yeah. Yeah.
But this is it, right? This is it. here's the thing. When everybody has access to a WMD, it only takes one really unhappy dude to fuck everything up, you know?
Yeah,
And
pretty bad.
my
Yeah.
first F-bomb of the conversation is a pattern interrupt to get everybody to wake up a little bit. Like, let's really grasp this. Guys, that's going to happen. Like, we're going to face that challenge. Before we get to that point where everybody has access to all of that, can we get each other to a point where we're functioning better, where we're healthy enough and we're at a state of equilibrium enough to where that's not going to happen, right? We have that to a certain extent, right? You know, we have structured society such that you don't have to worry too much about a guy, you know, popping you in the head when you walk down the street these days, right? However, that mechanism is not efficient enough to solve the problem that we're talking about here.
Yeah.
Because the consequences of just one event are so dire that we've got to have a much higher degree of mental health than we have now.
Well, and some of one part of the lockdown that I've been bringing up with people too, I call some of the training imagination training. And I know it sounds ridiculous, but with a little bit of meditation and contemplation on the idea, if a person's imagination is locked down, or if the imagination has grown obese and all it's being utilized for is to punish oneself for making mistakes, you know, or for saying a phrase the wrong way at the party and someone laughs at you and you think about it for months, and, you know, like obsession over what other people might be thinking when they're not even there. And even if it was true, it doesn't matter. So people are actually constantly utilizing, and even some high performing people, which is fascinating to me, like some of the highest performing people, like Robin Williams or someone, has an imagination abuse problem, you know. Somewhere in there things started, the inner talk, and it's not, you go movies like Lord of the Rings, full of beautiful adventure, and even offers a way of life that could work, like the Shire, you know. And I know you lived in New Zealand. That's an operational place. They pay people to keep those gardens going, you know. Yeah. And so, like, this adventure, all the things that people would love and enjoy to live and experience and explore is there in the movies and in TV, depicted beautifully. And you can actually trace out what a satisfying life path would be for yourself by writing a list of your top 10 favorite films and just figuring out what it was that you were really relating to in each film, and then construct that in your reality. But you run up against codes and judgments and neighbors and all these situations that, you know, kind of keep the imagination on lockdown. But that, to me, is the only limiting factor, is the lockdown on the imagination, because you can build and create almost anything now. The plans are there on YouTube. I mean, you could make yourself a Renaissance man, literally, with just YouTube instruction, you know. It's not far off.
It's not far off at all. But what are we doing with that is the question, and what will we do? And I think it's interesting. I mean, we're talking about, you know, many, many disparate ideas here, but I do believe they're all related. You know, when you talk about the shame culture that gets us having these, you know, imaginative conversations, these imaginative scenarios about, oh man, what are people thinking about me? You know, what did I do wrong? I've been there. I've really been there. In fact, there were points in my life where I was, you know, around groups of people who were so locked into that, and I was so intrinsically tied into those social groups that they destroyed my mind. You know, as a person, I wasn't able to fully express myself, and thankfully, I won't say who these people were, what time of my life this was. I don't want to give any clues, but I mean, thankfully, I was given the blessing of a catastrophic event that allowed me to extract myself from all of that. And thank goodness that happened. I don't know where my life would have gone had that not been the case. But not everybody has the tools that I've been lucky enough to acquire. If I hadn't acquired various tools, if I hadn't been friends with guys like Robert Anton Wilson, you know, earlier on in my life, when I was friends with Hyatt, you know, who was one of your mentors.
Yeah.
I would not have been able to pull myself away from all of that. That catastrophic event would have been a catastrophe and not a blessing for me, because I would have associated so much importance on all that. Oh my God, all these people, that's your whole life, that's your everything. When in fact, well, no, man, there's like 7 billion plus people on this planet right now. I mean, you don't have to be part of a single tribe anymore. And what somebody thinks about you, it's none of your business, as they say.
Right.
You need to trust your own mind enough. But that pressure mechanism is so multifaceted and is so deep that it's very, very hard. The other form that it takes is just overall societal pressure. You can't have aberrant ideas these days without a number of thought policemen jumping down your throat on Facebook, telling you that you're
right.
the man.
Well, that's where the spy comes in, and we've only got a couple minutes left here, but I would like to actually, I want to leave a cliffhanger and continue this as soon as we can. Actually, I think we got many directions to go with this, and I'm happy to do so. But that I think unites all of this is that regardless of what occurs, and I do agree with you, things are going to be getting, the high weirdness is going to be dominant more and more and more and more. You can even see it in the trends of the TV shows that are coming out, in the sci-fi. The cutting edge of the sci-fi world has always been a predictor and sometimes a help in creating circumstances.
That's right. That's right.
So I do agree that it's moving that direction. But that's where the idea of the spy and this victim to adventurer sort of approach comes from, is that I tell people to become a spy for your own enjoyment. So you're at a funeral. Okay, well, maybe you don't share that with anybody else. You play the role, you feel the feelings with everybody. But at the same time, you go, man, that's some beautiful flowers. The texture of this experience is great. The way they did the environment, someone mowed the lawn, whatever it is. The beautiful, amazing aspects of it. So that's where I see the spy. You always have a secret plan and always have some sense of waking up to receive your Christmas gifts, your birthday presents, and facing the world, bringing that to the world. And that can apply if you're a soldier listening to this in the middle of a war zone. You can do that action in your mind, all the way to the highest CEO, to a homeless person wandering down the street, and it's a common unit of human potential, a common unit of human functioning that's accessible at any moment.
I like it. As a former spy and as a spy of my own mind, I like that.
Yeah, so I want to get into that with you next time. I want to talk about your experience and what you learned and what that was like in your own mind, some of the training that you must have had to go through, and some of your own ideas about that and the function of that. Because there's a lot of guys in the consciousness movement too that I know have military intelligence background.
Yeah,
it's fascinating. Yeah.
Well, they recruited a lot of smart dudes. I mean, some of my best friends in life are guys, that shared that experience with me. In fact, I've got hopefully a get together with a lot of those guys in a few months, and there's just there's a bond that we have having gone through that. And I'll just say one funny thing about that. To leave this as a good, properly constructed cliffhanger, I'll say I can get into all those things and tell you some of the weird, spooky things that I can talk about. But we share this very interesting bond, and that's that we're all quite idealistic about the notions of America at the time. And look, and I'm sure that to some extent, everybody listening here shares those notions. There's this romantic notion of a place where anybody can go and can be a free thinker, unmolested by the government, unmolested by social mores, right? To go out and live their life as they choose. That's the U.S. was supposed to be the Shire, right? If historic portrayals of this are accurate, that was the original notion, to pull ourselves away from oppression. And our disillusion, I have to be very careful in the way I phrase this. I don't want to sound like I'm anti-American. I mean,
Sure.
to say that is a ridiculous thing because it'd be, anti an abstract notion, right?
Yeah.
And that abstract notion, if it's the way I just portrayed, is something I'm certainly not against. However, I think everybody is aware that there are certain abuses that are taking place, but not just in the American government. They're in all governments now, and we need to figure out ways to counteract that. But again, we need to pull ourselves outside of that old box of like, how do we overthrow the government?
Right. That's not a useful direction. Yeah. It's,
Not anymore.
Yeah.
No, I mean, who knows? I mean, whether or not it was at any point is moot at this point, because what it is now is there are going, well, okay, and I'll double the cliffhanger and I'll say, I think that the things are going to structure up in another way, and that we need to be very conscious of how we have, uber control mechanisms of those competing control mechanisms that come about, and we can talk about that very happily, I might add. I'm enjoying this conversation immensely in the next one.
Yeah, let's do it. Yeah, we'll schedule another one right away. So, well, let's just leave it there, and we'll pick up where we left off next time. So I want to say thanks very much for joining us, Mark. I have a great feeling about this, and I think folks will get a lot out of it, and plenty of places to go from here.
Awesome. Yeah, I enjoyed it.
Great. So if you folks want to learn more about Mark and what he's up to, you can check out Simpleology.com. That's Simpleology.com. And I'll put a link up right where you're listening to this as well, so you guys can find your way. And we'll bring Mark back very soon. So have a great evening, folks, and thanks again, Mark.
You.
Thank you for listening to the Art of Not Giving a Fuck podcast. For more info, visit artofnotgivingaffuck.com or radicalanddating.com.